I'm Paivi, and for the past 2 years I've worked at Unity Ads, working with large European advertisers in their mobile UA acquisition. And when I was thinking about the topic of this talk, I realized that there are repeating questions that all advertisers always ask, regardless of their type of the app, what they're trying to promote, and so on. So I decided to make a list of UA tips, and that from the network perspective. So on a quick note, when you think about how an ad network works, we have a lot of publishing games that we buy, we get the traffic from. And in Unity Ads, we have 50,000 live games. And these resonate to 400 million users. And then we have about 3,000 advertising games who are trying to reach those 400 million users. And since we have so many different advertisers that we work with, and we serve more than 3,000 advertising games, there are questions that advertisers face, I think this will help you make some conclusions and use these points on all networks out there. To start off with, we believe that multiple videos is better than one only, as not all users like the same type of or style of a video, but it doesn't mean that they will not like your game. So we just suggest that you target and create different types of videos, different styles, and launch them, do the same targeting, as each video has its own unique evaluation and eCPM. This will lead to you targeting larger audiences and more segments, and eventually it will lead into more volumes. However, don't assume that this will mean that 10 videos will mean 10 times more volumes. It does not, because the ad still needs to be engaging. It still needs to have a competitive eCPM. But be sure to test out different types of videos. This is one example of this, where a strategy game was struggling to reach higher volumes with one video. We added 2 more videos into the pool, and immediately the reaction was that they targeted the same audience, the same CPIs, and we tripled the volumes by just adding 2 more videos targeting the same points. The most common sub-level optimization is, of course, sources. So when to start off with blacklisting, we do not recommend you to pause a source with less than 100 installs. This is not enough sample for you to make a decision that the source is not good enough for you. Or another approach is that you don't pause the source at all. So you create a low bid campaign for particular low quality sources. So on the graph, you see that there was a casual game that had about 20 sources blacklisted and paused fully because the quality was quite low for them. And at one point, they wanted to get more volumes, and they wanted to focus on retention, not necessarily on immediate ROI. So we decided to relaunch those 20 paused sources and only bid 30% of the regular campaign. 30%, that's not a lot. So immediately they started getting 200 or 300 installs per day more. On a larger scale, it might not mean a lot, but without targeting these users or these sources at all, you would not get these 200 or 3,000 installs. Another point that I would really like to emphasize is the fact that you don't necessarily have to pause and focus on pausing low-quality users or sources. You can also whitelist the high-quality ones. So I feel like this is not something that advertisers do very often, where they notice 1, 2, 3 sources that are really high quality, and they bid a bit higher, 10% higher, 20% higher. You can reach up to 200% higher bid in those particular sources only. And you can afford it, and you should make the most of it. So on this graph, you see a social casino game that has most of their traffic coming from 5 whitelisted sources, and compared to the rest of the network. And you can see that from the graph. So I do recommend you to explore with sources on both layers, blacklisting and whitelisting. Another point, I don't know if all advertisers have the capability to do this, but explore your users on operating system level. So you pay higher for high-end operating system users. It's only doable if you have post-install event data on an OS level, and of course if you actually have quality difference per OS level. Even if you have never explored this before, I recommend you just try it. So if you are lacking somewhat an analytics tool that will give you the data on an OS level, then maybe look into that. Maybe you can start getting that data and explore it and build your campaigns towards that. This is one example that we did where a strategy game had maxed out all whitelist campaigns. They had low blacklist campaigns. So they were struggling to get higher volumes. So we decided to try this, that we start with Android, and we have 3 layers of tier 1, meaning the English-speaking countries, for instance, and we target 4.0 to 4.4 OS level, then we have 5.0 to 5.1, and the last layer would be 6.0 operating system and above. All these campaigns had $1 CPI difference, and it had an immediate impact, where the ROI was so good still that they could start slowly increasing the CPI more and more until they maxed out. So we decided to do the same exercise with iOS, that also on the whitelist campaigns, and as you can see from the graph, both volumes increased quite nicely. I think this is one point that lots of advertisers are asking, why won't we as a network suggest you target the specific demographics? We believe that demographic targeting might be a bit limiting your potential, and since the numbers that I showed you before, networks have huge amounts of data. We have a huge amount of data sets and audience that we can look into. So we don't encourage you to start a campaign targeting only male 25 plus, or target only females, or target only casual games, because this, in our view, is you making a campaign targeting based on assumption, but we recommend you to do it based on actual data. So the networks should optimize towards the install, and you should optimize towards the quality of the install. So at Unity Ads, we have a twofold approach for this. So first, we predict and evaluate the potential eCPM of your campaign. And then after that, after we have learned the eCPM, we optimize towards it. For prediction, we use machine learning, and we look into the historical data of the user, the publishing games, and what we believe could work for your app. And machine learning is very useful because it utilizes all dimensions possible. We teach the computer what to optimize and let it do the job and learn it. And the factors that we count in this approach is the context. So what is the country that you're targeting? What's the day of the week? What's the publishing game? Where the user is coming from? Then the personal interest profile of the user. How many ads have they seen? Which device are they using? And then, of course, we look into the campaign's past performance and how old is the campaign and so on. So when it comes to understanding what the eCPM is, we start optimizing towards it. We don't assume, we don't make any assumptions on having some input having a certain impact, and then we just explore the data and we figure it out and make different combinations to ensure that you get the most in your campaigns. Another interesting point, I believe, is that advertisers often think that 10% of increase in bid will mean that there's going to be only 10% in increase in volumes. That is not the case, because if you change your bid, you will change your position in the ad plan. And this is an exponential growth. It's not linear. So in Unity Ads, we have a tool where we can base your campaign data into 7-day past performance, and we can make an estimation to see how much more impressions would you get if you increase the bid by 10%, 20%, 100% even. So in the table here, the first column shows what is the increase in percentage, and the last column is how much more impressions would you get. So campaign 1, you see there that, for instance, with 30% increase in the CPI, you would only get 15% increase in volumes. That pretty much doesn't make any sense. So we don't recommend you to do this. This campaign is maxed out. You're getting as much as you can. You have to start whitelisting or doing other things. But on the campaign number 2, with even like 10% increase in CPI, you would get 51% more impressions, and so more and more. So this will be a very, very good approach for you to just test out, see the maximum of your CPI and what makes sense for a campaign. Here's one example of that approach where this is a casual game. We had 5 campaigns that we were looking into with the tool that we have with the estimations. And as you can see here, we increased the bid per campaign about 10%. Some had 50% increase. And the CPI did not increase that much, but the volumes went from 2,000 installs per day to 8,000 with a slight change in CPI. Very worth to test it out. This might be a bit of a simple way to look at things, but I believe that if naturally every account manager on the network side and like a UA manager on the advertiser side, you talk on a daily basis or a weekly basis about campaigns. But I really recommend you to have conversations on a quarterly basis on a more strategic level. So because there's a lot of changes in each ad network that might affect your campaigns that you can't even think of. So there are always new features and tools for the internal team. For instance, the CPI increase estimation tool that we have, or when will any campaign hit caps, and so on. Then there are algorithmical changes and evaluation that might have an impact on you. Then account managers face a lot of, or see a lot of videos on a regular basis. And maybe there aren't many new innovative things that you can think of that apply to you necessarily, but there might be some points that is just interesting to hear that you can pass over to your design team that they can also test it out. And naturally, each network has their own tests that they are doing, for instance, for default end cards. So like having a test to see if a green button is working better than a blue button. This definitely has its impact, 1%, 2% better in conversion rate. You might not be able to use it immediately, but you can, again, pass it over to your team, think about it, new approaches, and so on. And as a last point, your video is a showcase of your app. So I really recommend you try out very many different things with the videos that you have. So naturally, in-game special events with characters, levels, and so on is to be very much supported in your video. But try out different factors too. Real gameplay footage or actual footage of a person playing your app. I feel like there are not many videos out there who do that. Showing actual fingers using dragging, tapping, gestures, and so on. Short on-screen messages, I feel like is very important because the majority of your users are not playing the games with the sound on. So if you do not have any messages on the screen, you might miss out on a lot of good information for the player. Obviously, localized videos if you're doing international user acquisition. And when it comes to length, we support 15 to 30-second videos, and what we have seen is that 15 seconds is usually good for casual games. 30 seconds is great for mid or hardcore games because it has a longer period to convey the user why is this particular game better than the other. 22-second one is good optimal length in our opinion. But going back to the point number 1, we suggest you try all these lengths, even if the same contact, because that will make it work and you will target larger audiences. Yeah, so these are the 7 points that I wanted to make that lots of networks are facing with different advertisers. I hope you learned something new, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Paivi. Any questions from the audience? Paivi, what is your title, or what do you actually do in Unity Ads?
I do both account management and business development. So basically, I come to these conferences to teach and get more advertisers on board, and as well as grow the accounts.
And this research was conducted by you or
by myself? Yes.
And you're using it now as tips to help suggest the developers.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess developers that are using Unity Ads can approach you for...
Absolutely, we have a booth, and we are very willing to talk to all of you if you have any more questions about this. How did we get to this point? What do other types of app providers use, do, test, and so on?
Okay, thanks, Paivi.